the Bills. Last year, we're also kind of a Super Bowl favorite. Started the season as the third-ranked team, moved up to the best team for a little while there in the beginning of the season, and then even to close the season, in arguably one of the best games in NFL history, with the Chiefs in the playoffs, going to OT, kind of back and forth. A lot of people suggest that the Bills were still better than the Chiefs. So they ended up going 11-6, meeting expectation of 11, went 9-6-2 against the spread, made better, $100 better, $100. Always, no one ever kind of gave up with them. They had that really nasty game versus the Jags when they lost 9-6, like total head scratcher, and then got blown out by the Colts at home a couple weeks later in kind of miserable weather game.
I was actually on the Colts that week. I had a whole extensive write-up about how I thought the Bills hadn't been tested on the run defense, and that if the Colts got control of the game early, they could just run all over them. I mean, look, they had plenty of bad luck, too. It wasn't just some bad losses. They were 0-5 in one-score games. So while there were some kind of head-scratching losses, there also were probably some more wins in there.
Yeah, and if we kind of move on, we kind of see the market was super hot on them, of course, being one of the top teams. It kind of stayed hot on them. They were a kind of top 10 pick in the super contest. Looks like pretty much half the season were more competitive than even 11 wins would suggest, which kind of goes to your point of kind of being 0-5 in one-score games, kind of getting some like anti-luck. We look at the 7-day line change on them on a week-to-week basis. The line was pretty much consistently always moving in their favor. Anything else that kind of sticks out to you on the kind of week-by-week basis?
Yeah, looking back, the Steelers game was a bit weird, and it gives me almost a little bit of pause on Josh Allen. Meaning I think the Bills have a really good case to be Super Bowl favorites, but the consistency is not there in the same way that it is for kind of the Mahomes and the Rodgers. But there's some surprising losses, right? The Chiefs aren't scoring 6 points against the Jaguars. The Chiefs are not losing a game to the Steelers early in the year. That sort of sticks out to me as almost a word of caution.
But they were also very lucky from an injuries perspective. So they were kind of ranked kind of second most healthy team last year. So really never got dinged by the injury bug in a meaningful way that would kind of disrupt their performances. And we know that kind of on a season by season basis, that's going to be very difficult to sustain. And even still, again, they were 11-6, 9-6 against the spread. It's not like they were necessarily kind of crushing expectation. That's why I'm not necessarily super bullish on them. And as we kind of, again, relative to expectation, because especially as we kind of go into the offseason, so they picked up Elam from Florida, go Gators, definitely one of the top ranked kind of quarterbacks in the class. Ron loved that pick, thought that was their number one need, especially since they lost Levi Wallace in the offseason. And then also Kadarius White tore his ACL in November. We don't know. He's not going to start the season, or it's going to be very unlikely that he's going to start the season. Who knows when he's going to come back. I mean, when you rely on speed, you rely on pivoting like a cornerback does. I mean, kind of coming back from an ACL injury, it's hard to imagine you're necessarily going to be the same kind of player that you were. So kind of getting that young blood in, it's going to be, kind of really important. He's likely going to be starting right off the bat. The other thing is, I mean, not a lot of rookie cornerbacks play well in their first season, even if they're kind of a top 5 pick.
So I think if there were cornerbacks to succeed, having the safety duo of Hyde and Poyer behind you is certainly playing to the strengths, which is to say that he's put in the right situation to succeed.
Yeah, no, that's great points. I mean, arguably the best safety duo in the NFL. I don't think that safety duo when they were on the field at the same time gave up 1 touchdown for 20 yards last year. So kind of always protecting the deep shot. When it comes to those offseason changes, I think the thing to highlight here the most is the loss of Brian Daboll at OC. How is that going to impact play calling, the rhythm of the offense? They're replacing him with Ken Dorsey, who was their quarterback coach, so you have at least a little bit of continuity there. It's like
that has some signal, actually, which is that they're really trying to continue course. They're staying within and not trying to reinvent themselves. But
yeah, I think I would agree with that. I think where we've talked about in the previous teams when there's been disruption either at the head coaching or the offensive coordinator or what the play calling is going to be, there's a lot of uncertainty. I would probably tilt more so here along with kind of like how you just described it, is there's less uncertainty here around how that play calling is likely to be. I think keeping it in-house, keeping it not just in-house, but at the quarterback coach, somebody who Josh Allen is still very familiar with, that it's very likely. And how can you look at the performance of the offense the last couple of years and be like, oh, we need to make a change?
Yeah, exactly. Which I think points to kind of more macro point about like buying into organizations that are doing things the right way.
Yeah, and the one thing that I wanted to point out too is the drafting of James Cook, running back from Georgia in the second round. I mean, Zach Moss really kind of never caught on, and they're definitely a team that wants to kind of distribute the ball in the backfield. And one thing that I was reading about is when the Bills struggled in those games that we kind of highlighted, like versus the Jags, like versus the Colts, and even that game versus the Patriots in that miserable weather that they lost 14-10, was Dermott explicitly lamenting the fact that they couldn't run the ball and that he wanted to run the ball more, that's like what a successful team has to be able to do in those particular situations. And then picking James Cook in the second round, I'm wondering if the loss of Brian Daboll, again, suggests that the offense should stay kind of consistent with what it was. But I wonder if this opens the door for McDermott to have more influence, and that if he has this affinity to want to run the ball more.
Yeah. I mean, my lean is that's just coach speak. They were third last year in pass rate over expected, passing 5% of the time. But, we'll know early on whether or not, and again, that can change, but where they're leaning there. I actually wanted to highlight a different, draft pick of theirs, which is their punter. The Bills really struggled on special teams. Matt Reese has got a massive leg. I think if anyone's been on Twitter or YouTube, you've seen that. And the Bills were dead last in punt average, 42 yards. Even if you improve that to, 50 yards, that's still, even if they're punting 3 times a game, that stuff adds up. That's a couple hundred yards over the course of the season.
Yeah, no, that's a great call out. I wonder how well he'll do, coming from San Diego State, punting in elements,
That's right.
like Buffalo. But yeah, if you can improve performance there, that's one of those kind of things that goes a little bit unrecognized. It's not sexy, but we know when you're watching the games, you're seeing these things play out, that can certainly move the needle.
Yeah, yards are yards.
So let's go into 2022, 12 wins, as we talked about at the top. Man, that's hot. Playoffs minus 525. There's so much that can go wrong in like anyone's season. I would never bet minus 525. And then plus 600 to win the Super Bowl, which is also one of the highest numbers that I've really seen over the last couple of years. So market very hot on the Bills, the PyTag model 2.0. Again, no bet. Again, one of the things I did want to mention was PyTag 1.0. That indication suggests that you should bet the Bills over. Got a positive net rest of plus 12 days, mean spread approaching a touchdown, well over a field goal, around minus 5 points. We can see it on the screen. I mean, pretty much heavy favorites in 5-6 games. And, again, they don't have a very tough schedule. It's basically middle of the road. We see it's 15th kind of hardest schedule. And you're obviously going to benefit when you're playing the Jets twice, you're playing the Lions, you're playing the Bears. And then again, you only got really a handful of games for super tough teams, or arguably tough teams. Rams, Ravens, Packers, Bengals. So that's where I guess I could see the angle towards why you might want to take them over the 12, even as aggressive as it is. Mostly because this looks like a relatively accommodative schedule.
To counter that slightly, they've got a bunch of tough away games, right? They're playing at LA, at Baltimore, at Kansas City, at Cincinnati, and some of their tougher games actually come on the road as opposed to at home. 12 is a huge number. It's a huge number, and so many things can go wrong in an NFL season. That betting over is a real tough sell.
Yeah, the home away split is a good call out too, especially the first 4 games. 3 road games out of that first 4. So away at the Rams, kick off the season, away at the Dolphins, away at Baltimore. And then you get a little bit of a respite versus Pittsburgh at home, but then you go right back on the road versus the Chiefs. So that's certainly a tough kind of first 6 games there. Then they go into their bye, and then they kind of come out and play on Sunday Night Football versus the Packers. It's going to be a high-profile game. But already, I mean, even now, they're like minus 4 in that game. So getting a lot of kind of a benefit of the doubt. Minus essentially a touchdown versus the Vikings. I mean, these are some aggressive spreads in my view. Again, that just kind of piles into the fact of just how hot the market is on the Bills.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you.
All right, so that was a good kind of rundown of the AFC East. Kind of one of the best bets that we had was taking the Patriots kind of under. A lot of question marks around the Dolphins kind of heading in the season. And then I can think we're maybe a little bit split on the Jets.
Definitely split on the Jets.
Have a tough schedule. I don't love Zach Wilson. I'm happy to be proven wrong. We'll be back next week and be previewing another division kind of as we head into training camp. So we'll see you then. We're going to hit the closing bell.